Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are podcasts. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. We'd love to hear from you. Hit us up at DJ@ArtistFirst.com. Here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, C-Man, and happy solstice.
Happy solstice.
Happy solstice. Because tonight is the darkest night of the year.
No. Oh, I see.
And there's no moon at all.
Isn't this the longest night as well?
It is the longest night, but tonight is the night of the new moon, which does not happen that often on solstice.
Yeah, that's unusual.
It's unusual. So, darkness.
And we have the show tonight. Okay.
It is dark out there. And tonight we are going to talk about love, joy, and peace.
Oh, all right. We're going to just brighten things up.
We're going to brighten things up. And in fact, what I always used to refer to this solstice night or the next day as the first day of spring.
Oh, that's true.
Because I am an optimist, and I figured let's just skip winter, kind of like the Monty Python routine, and go right into spring. But of course, tonight is the longest night. Tomorrow, the days, I believe tomorrow is still the shortest day, but then from that point on, the days will get longer. And, ancient societies, human beings throughout the centuries and millennia, have always noted this time as basically to note the fact that there's a renewal, there's a rebirth, that the cycle of the year is complete. And the cycle of the year and the cycles of the universe are reflected in us. We all have our spring and our summer and our fall and our winter in our lives. And then within that larger, grander cycle, you have the little cycles. You have the years that go by and the milestones and the rebirths which come throughout your life. The new beginnings, the new start, and also the losses, the little deaths, the losses of a loved one, the losses of just things that you could once do that you now can't do. So these cycles are reflected within us, and that's why this has a powerful meaning when you have the solstice, the summer and the winter solstice, and its reflection into the year, the spring and the autumn time. And so, but all that, that sort of framing this, what we're going to talk about tonight is something a little bit more us. Mm-hmm. Because, we love Eckhart Tolle, and the phrase I believe that struck you a couple weeks back, because we found this, and then it wasn't quite the right time, was that the state of being, the actual state of being that you want to cultivate, or maybe the expression, the emotional expression, the wholesome expression of the state of being of awareness in consciousness could be referred to and should be referred to as joy.
You mean the ground state?
The ground state, and people say, well, joy is if I have a birthday party or something. Yes, there are certainly aspects of that in all happy moments in your life. But if you think about, let's say, just take one of those happy moments, you can oftentimes in the middle of a happy moment have a moment within that of awareness of, this doesn't last forever, but right now everything is good. I'm open. I'm with people I love. I feel a certain timelessness to that moment, and that's something that you can enter into. I'll say with practice, but with awareness, you can enter into that moment in any moment, in any season of your life, even in what would be the darkest night perhaps of the year or the darkest night of the soul, there's a certain ground state, Margaret just said, of awareness, which in consciousness and in awareness, there is joy. And it has little, at some point, this sounds funny, but has little to do with what's actually perhaps going on or what the world would say of your situation.
Well, yes. I think it's important to make the distinction between your emotions and your state of being. Because most people believe that their emotions are their state of being, or what their background state of being is. And there is a distinction. There is a separation. Your emotions are when you feel happy or sad or
angry,
right, or anxious. Isn't there 5?
Seven.
7?
Yes. Would you like me to name them all?
Sure.
There is sadness, happiness, fear, contempt, disgust, anger. How many have I got there?
No, I don't know. I wasn't counting.
I'll go through it again. Here we go. There's happiness, sadness, anger, fear, contempt, disgust, and one more.
Is laughter part of it?
No.
Happiness?
Nope, said that one. It'll come back to me in a minute. But there's 7 basic human emotions, and surprise. Surprise is always the one I always forget about because it's so surprising. And surprise, has its own. Each one of these has its own facial, identifiable, recognizable, repeatable across all human beings' facial expression, which is why they're considered the universal emotions. But in any case, yes, those are the 7.
Those are the 7 classified 7 universal.
Yes. I think you just muted yourself.
There. Yeah, I leaned over. Sorry, guys.
Yes.
Universal emotions that are expressed, but they are not your state of being.
No.
They are what rises in you, and that's what you feel, and it is what other people feel.
That's a good point.
Yes, because most people mistake these emotions as their state of being. I am happy.
The am word.
Right.
Identifying.
I am afraid. I am
angry.
Or I am sad. Was sad one of the...
Oh, yes. Sad.
But my point being, this is how that mistake,
misapprehension, confusion.
This is how the confusion does arise.
Right.
Because who you actually are, as opposed to how you feel, are 2 different things. And we have a tendency to just sort of ball all that up together, which then begins to lay a foundation for all kinds of conflict. Because when an emotion rises and you think that you're that emotion, people can get lost in these emotions and they wind up doing things that they really didn't want to do, or saying things they really didn't want to say. When you realize this is something you are experiencing and it's not you, it gives you a greater perspective. In other words, you're saying you're sad about something, and someone else is saying, well, no, that makes me laugh. And then you get angry if you think that you are the sadness, then you get angry because you think that you should have every right to exist because you've identified yourself as sadness, instead of saying, well, that sadness is what I'm feeling right now, but that person over there is feeling something very different, meaning that they perceive something very different. So you don't take it personally. You realize that there are different levels of perception going on and different interpretations of the situation or the experience that is unfolding in front of you.
That's very profound. You know, what you just said, you really should dwell on that a bit, because that's exactly right. When you identify with your emotion, whatever it may be, you feel threatened and even attacked. If another being, another person says, that makes me feel a different way. And you can see that writ large over social media all the time, you know. And because people identify with their emotion, whatever it may be, they feel attacked at an existential identity level.
Well, they feel like what you're saying is they shouldn't exist.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with what the actual situation is.
Right.
And to be aware enough, and if I might say, adult enough to be able to look at your emotions and understand that your emotions do not govern you. They should not be dictating to you the way you will choose or walk through life. And that's a very difficult thing, especially if you started out just identifying with every emotion you feel.
Right. And if you work with kids, which you do a lot, one of the biggest, one of the best lessons you can teach them is that when their emotions rise up and their emotions are very strong, and to teach them that they feel sad or angry. Oh, I'm sure that made you feel angry. So that construction of you feel, which is a verb, you know, angry, not, oh, you must be angry, or you're angry, or don't you get angry, which is often what people will say to a child, you know. Why are you so angry? Why are you angry? Identifying and reinforcing rather than separating.
Right. It perpetuates dramas within a family. Because everybody just makes the assumption that, well, that's the child that's always angry.
The angry man, right?
Right. Or that's the child that's always sad, depressed. This is it's something that the language itself would be an excellent tool to begin to understand and manage what is actually going on, your perception of what is happening. So, being allowed to feel what you feel, to acknowledge that I feel this emotion, and it's okay for you to feel that way. To begin to see that, because I believe in a family, sometimes there are, what's the word I'm looking for? You're not supposed to feel certain things. You're not supposed to feel angry. You're not allowed to feel that. You're not allowed to feel sad. You know, you have to be cheerful all the time. And if you've identified with those emotions, you sit there and you go, I'm being rejected by my family.
Right.
If I do this, I will be rejected. And it's deep-seated, it begins to establish deep-seated insecurities.
Traumas, in essence. You know, and there's a trap in there, which you've already outlined, even in what we would call the positive emotions. You know, if somebody says, oh, you're always happy, you're always happy, you may feel an inability to express your emotions of sadness or your emotions of anger. You know people who feel trapped into this, always have to put a happy face on everything, and they've cut themselves off from a range of experience and emotions, which is part of the human experience, all these 7 emotions and many other subtleties and nuances of the same. And if you've identified yourself, or if you've been kind of stuffed into an identity, it can become a suit of armor. It can become a stricture, a prison. We talked about prisons last week a little bit. That prison can be even one where, so-and-so they're always happy, they're always upbeat, and it's almost as though you can't feel sad. You can never be a broader, greater, more in-depth person to feel all the emotions. You have to hide those emotions because, everyone wants me to be happy all the time. So it's all of them are all identities, all emotions can be traps.
Well, that's when you begin to make splits within yourself, because then you start having arguments with yourself. Well, I'm not supposed to feel that way, but I feel that way. Well, why can't I? And then, people will do stuff to themselves that really is just not healthy. It can escalate. Some people just keep shoving that feeling under the rug, and it keeps building and building until there's an explosion.
Right.
And nobody knows what happened.
Right, the person who's always happy who then suddenly injures themselves or even commits suicide. You say, well, he was always, or she was always happy. But in fact, that prison of having to be the outwardly happy person might have packing in and concealing decades of anger or sadness or other things. And in identifying oneself as this emotion, you wound yourself, and that pain and suffering will grow. Now, there's ways to get around it, therapy or awareness or meditations and many other ways to come back to a healthier perception of awareness of who you actually are.
The soul itself, if you look at it in terms of what is the soul, and we always say this is the part of you that thinks and feels and chooses. Okay. And again, it's the same kind of mistake. People believe that the thinking part of you is actually your consciousness. And it's not. Just as the emotional, you're feeling the emotions part of you, you think that is consciousness. And it's not. These are tools by which you experience this particular world. These are tools by which you have relationship with the other, whether the other is a person or an experience or an event or even a place. But these are beginning to understand what's actually in your toolbox, what's in your soul. And whether or not you understand the range and the depth of each tool, meaning each emotion or each thought or way of thinking. And when you have that, you're able to present to yourself a very broad, clear field in which to make a decision. If the emotions or thoughts are running the show, you do not have a broad field. It has been narrowed down to what the ego would like you to look at.
Yeah. I mean, this is a wonderful point to jump off on a little bit. The ensoulment of consciousness is the distillation of consciousness into a physical form, which is embodied by the soul. The body has a soul. You have a soul, but that soul, as Margaret just said, is a collection of many different things, experiential tools. What you would say, the word is soulless if somebody can't feel anything. If they're a psychopath and they have no way to relate to anyone, you say they're soulless. Well, it's not that they are soulless, but their soul is grievously wounded by this inability to feel or to relate. If somebody has a tremendous mental deficit, you might look at them and say, well, they're living almost a fruitless life. They can't remember anything, or they can't think about anything, or they can't take in any information. They're very, very dependent and helpless. None of this has anything to do with their being. Their being is their being. You can find a being in an aspect of being in every incarnate person down here. Their soul may be damaged at a physical level, at a cellular level, at a emotional level, at a mental level. And the body itself may, of course, be damaged. But those are all part of the incarnation. Incarnation is consciousness within the body. These are important terms. And what Margaret is saying here is that your soul is the part of you that has a morality. To use a word that people hate. What is a morality? It has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with choosing between what is right and what is wrong. And the basic forms of morality almost don't seem as though they are. Do I do something which creates or something which destroys? That doesn't sound like morality, but it is in effect. You choose experientially, taking in all the information. And you can see it in four-year-olds all the time. I want the purple one. No, I want the purple one. Well, there's a moral dilemma here. Who gets the purple one? And they have to work it out. There's emotions and thoughts and feelings and desires and all those things. Those are all within the purview of the soul. And then there's a choice to be made. And feeling what the other feels. If you look at someone when you're taking away their purple thing and they look very, very sad, you might feel sad yourself. Well, this is good. This is a good way of understanding that the soul of the other is reflected within you. And you might feel sorry for them, and you might share your purple thing with them. These are all exactly what the soul is supposed to do. It's supposed to feel the other. It's supposed to think about the other. It's supposed to have the mental tools and the emotional tools and all the other experiential tools, because that's how you relate down here.
And I want to qualify one thing that I did say. I was saying that these are tools, but the soul is not a toolbox.
Yes.
Okay.
But the analogy is good.
Let me finish. When you understand that the soul, by implementing these tools, has the experience is what the soul is engaged in. Okay, it becomes part of itself. Maybe that's the best way. You are expressing qualities in the soul with these tools. And you always have the choice of, say, with a 4-year-old, sharing or not sharing.
Would you say, though, the experiential soul grows here through experience and takes the experience back to consciousness? And that whole idea of the growth of soul is why you're here. You come down into incarnation. We say down, but you become incarnated, consciousness within a body, ensouled with tools and relationships, and they write upon your soul your experiences, the things that you chose that were good or bad or this or that, And those experiential choices and all the things that you did here are part of what you bring back, your individual contribution to the whole, to the greater, to spirit. It is you, in one sense. It is an aspect of you, a unique embodiment and soulment of consciousness.
Well, the soul is unique.
Yes.
It is an spirit coming into form.
Yes.
And the soul is also eternal. It is part of it. It is the interface, and maybe that's the better word to use, between this world of form and the energies that are life itself.
Yes. And, we've talked a lot about ensoulment and embodiment tools, but what we're talking about here is the being state. The being state is where the soul realizes, becomes aware that it is of consciousness, that it is, in fact, completely within a consciousness, and it becomes aware of its toolbox, if you will, or of the tools of experience, the tools that are here, and doesn't have what we said earlier, what Margaret said earlier, the confusion, because the soul can become confused, start to understand itself in terms of a very narrow field, an emotional relationship all the time. I'm always angry, I'm always angry, I'm angry, I'm angry. And the ego can in essence narrow the field so much that it becomes a prison. And the experiential soul is choked. It's not nourished anymore by the whole breadth of experience that can be that can be enjoyed here. It becomes afflicted by suffering, self-afflicted, if you will, by suffering from having identified itself with a very small part of its experiential toolbox. It's like you become a wrench or a hammer. And instead of being able to employ that tool or put it down or use it at the appropriate time and not use it at another, it's like everything looks like a nail if all you have is a hammer. You become a limited and probably a suffering soul because you have narrowed your focus or narrowed your boundaries down to something that doesn't allow you to feel free to have the experience that you hoped and wished to have when you were embodied. You can escape that prison, but the only way through is to escape, is to engender your awareness of being.
Right. Right. So, I believe we've gone through the first half of the hour.
Well, we could do that. I thought you had another thought. But yes, I'll tell you what, we will go back to the studio. We'll think about love, joy, peace, and the solstice, and we'll come back on the other side and talk more about those things.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
Moonstones and Murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some Moonstones and Murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Devkalion, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Brag Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lynes, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Hi, this is Hannah Ruth from the band Wild Hum. Check out our new Americana Soul CD, Wild Hum, at our website, wildhum.music.com. And you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lynes.
Thank you very much, D-Man. And we are back. And tonight we are celebrating the solstice in one regard. We're also talking about, we've spent the first half hour talking a bit about experiential tools that the soul has down here and that we all have down here. But our premise tonight was that there are, this time of year particularly, there's a certain stillness that comes over the world, at least in the in the northern hemisphere, we have winter, and there's in culturally throughout history and prehistory, this has been a time of year when people will gather and to celebrate the rebirth, the rebirth of the year, when the sun starts to, the day starts to be a little longer. But from the point of view of our quote, and we didn't read the quote, but I will right now, love, joy, and peace are deep states of being, and what we wanted to focus on was that the fact that those are deep states of being. That we were talking about how the soul is the part of you that feels and thinks and chooses, but the soul is also the interface between the physical and the spirit, the actual consciousness, and therefore the soul is also contained, an aspect of consciousness, and through the soul's toolbox, awareness and relationships, it can start to expand into a fuller understanding of being, of what it is an aspect of.
You mean consciousness, understanding itself?
Exactly. The soul, rather than getting narrowed down into its toolbox or into emotion or thinking, you all know people who are trapped in thought or trapped in emotion. You can become aware, and in awareness enter, I believe Tully calls it, the fourth state of consciousness. And the fourth state of consciousness is awareness of your being. And in this time of year, it's a very appropriate thing to have this stillness, this awareness. And as the base state of that, you will find joy. And this is where we started a couple weeks back when we began this idea of this topic, is that joy is not, I'll say this is a weird way of saying it, but I'll say it, it's not a reasonable joy. It's not something that you could say, oh yes, of course, anybody would be joyful under those circumstances. In fact, the world may look at you and say, how can you be, they'll say, how can you be happy? Everything around you is crashing down. You have sickness in your family. You have terrible economic troubles, all these things, war and pestilence and all that stuff. And yet, it doesn't seem to alter your base state, your awareness of your existence and the joy that comes from that. And you will baffle people. The baffling part about it is experientially, all those things are happening, but in awareness, you realize that these are just experiences, that it doesn't change the being, and that the being's base state, acceptance of the experience, understanding that this is just an experience, that it is just an emotion, it is just a thought, it is just a situation, that your being is eternal, it brings a quiet sense of, it can only be said, and the word doesn't encapsulate it properly enough, of joy.
Right. Again, I say joy as your ground state. But in the quote, it was love, joy, and peace, correct?
Yes.
That Eckhart Tolle had said.
Our deep states of being, yes.
Yes. So it goes back to beginning to understand the differences that these words are. When most people roll joy and happiness together, boom. And love, goodness knows, there's dozens of words to describe love. And peace, most people classify peace as there's no conflict, there's no trouble.
Right.
To be able to look past just those surface states is where, excuse me,
Oh well, I'm sorry. You want to? Is where you find the deep being state. I think I'll just say where I think you were going with this, which is all those three things: the love, the joy, and the peace are conflated by people with some of the other words like happiness or love is something to do with having a relationship or loving ice cream or whatever it is, and peace is, like you said, no conflict. But all of those have a root in a still awareness of being. When you are in a consciousness aware state, when consciousness is aware of being conscious, there's a tremendous peace. And the peace is the peace of acceptance of being and the inviolability, the invulnerability of being. Being is not something which is subject to the incarnation or to the variegacies of the universe. Being just is. And it is eternal and timeless. And in that you will find a tremendous root state, a ground state of peace. You can see it in enlightened souls. Let's just pick a few, like the Dalai Lama and so on. There's tremendous underlying peace in every word and action. There's a tremendous underlying joy and love. I believe he even says, kindness is my religion. Loving kindness is my religion. Loving kindness, the awareness of being and the seeing of the other as a being. It has a wonderful, beautiful peace to it. It has a beautiful stillness to it. It becomes sort of indescribable because all these different facets that people have grown their own meanings off to, love, joy, and peace, they all have this root state in the consciousness which is aware of being conscious and accepts its being, its state, its current now in peace, in love, in joy. But it's really beyond all those three. Those are just words, important words. Your mic's off. It's way up here.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
The state of being where you become I hate to reuse words, that's annoying. Being aware that you are separate from the madness that you're putting yourself through. The anxiety that rises because you're interacting with everything around you. The fear that, oh no, I may not make that deadline. I may not make the flight. I may not make the what's being required of me at work. When you realize that your consciousness is observing you, and that anxiety that you're experiencing is not you. You're actually looking at it, saying, who am I looking at? Because my state of observation, there is no anxiety. It is encapsulated in this form that I thought was me. I feel anxious, but I am not anxious. Or the anger that happens because you feel something unjust has happened to you. Realizing that I feel angry, and you're seeing that part of you that's angry. You're actually observing your angry self. but you're not it. You're observing it. That state where the space abides is where the peace rises. Because in that space is a wholeness of being. Nothing missing, nothing broken. And you're just observing a reaction that has been happening to that interactive part of you that is extending out to the world, which I would normally say is your ego. To make space for that reaction, it doesn't mean you have to kick it out. It's just understanding that's the reaction. And it's okay to have the reaction, but it's not destroying you, nor the space around you, or the peace that abides in that space. Your intrinsic being is whole.
Right, inviolable, uninjured. It's not uninvolved, but it's not having its power usurped by the experiential ego, nor is the ego parasitically taking energy away, kind of using the consciousness as a giant battery. Yes, you're right. The ego will still be there. It will become a piece of you which does these things. Because you're not a soulless thing. You still will have emotions. You will still have thoughts. But they will have their proper place.
Exactly.
You might still feel angry. You might still feel sad. But you've just observed these things in the peace.
And what you will observe, what you will acknowledge, is the fact that suddenly there is a space for this emotion. Because many times the emotion, if it's judged, gets squeezed out of that space, almost denying that it exists.
Right.
And so it will come right back to you because it's actually that interaction that's part of you. And it'll hit you again and again and again until you acknowledge that it exists. So when you are in that state of observation, of awareness, you have provided a space for that feeling, that anger, let's say. And you observe it, well, that's anger. It's acknowledged. There is a space for it, but it doesn't drive the rest of your being. You acknowledge that it is there. It's an aspect of what has happened in your environment or your experience. So making space is key for the holding peace within you. And holding that space leads you to the two other descriptions that Tolle had talked about, which is joy and love. And I believe it's in the Bible where, was it Timothy? You have not been given a spirit of fear.
The fear, that's 2 Timothy, yeah.
But you have been given a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. If you look at that in the highest optimum form of where emotion brings you, it is love. Highest form of where wholeness or peace brings you, it is soundness of mind. Because in that peace, you see everything.
Yes.
And then power. Where does that power lay? In your consciousness. Your ability to observe and to choose. When you are in that full state of awareness. Incredible power.
Yeah, and I think, to just emphasize your point, the idea of, and you're working with a 4-year-old, so when you teach initially that you feel something or you think something, you're not are this or identified by that, you teach them that there's space. And then you can further that and say give them the idea of there's more and more space, that you can look at the feeling of an angry thought and give it the space to be there within your consciousness, to not take over. You feel angry. Okay, I feel angry. And in consciousness and in peace, you let the anger just be there. It's a flickering flame. It doesn't become an inferno that engulfs you and takes you, as you were saying before, so you say things and do things. It doesn't drive you to action. It doesn't drive you to speak in anger. But it's there. You're not an automaton suddenly when you become an awareness. You are a fully realized human being with all the emotions, with all the thoughts, with the power to be able to harness them all in full awareness. In really, and from that comes love also, because in full awareness you can even love the most abject misery that is around you, and find a way to perhaps ease it, or at least to be with it. Mother Teresa type of thing.
You are in a state of being. You are love in that state.
Yes.
It's not objectified. It is a being state where you are love. You are the space of love. In that, not concept, but in that frequency, you are shown, guided, or the appropriate action that agrees with that wholeness or frequency or environment or air of love. When you are in that state of love, it flows naturally right out of your heart. And the next thing to do is it just flows like water on a waterfall falling down. It's a beautiful thing, because then you are flowing with that frequency of love and life. It's reaffirming life, even though there's crazy stuff going on. Okay, it's not always happy. It's like people think happy, joy. No.
No. Well, and you'll find that in that state which you just described, the next thing which needs to be, whether it needs to be done or it just needs to be observed, it doesn't take from you in a self-sacrificing or draining way. You can do great works and be totally exhausted by them. In this case, you're connected up to source. You're connected up to being, and it's inexhaustible. Your ability to, in awareness, act or not act, to love in an unconditional sense, even what is quote unquote unlovable, doesn't take from you. It just is part of the experience. Perhaps you're giving succor, perhaps you're admonishing, perhaps you're helping, perhaps you're doing nothing but observing, being. But all those things are things which the universe needs to have done, and you are there to do them. In essence, you say, use me, but it's not even that, because the identity isn't there. You just are there in observation, and when the opportunity, if you will, arises, you're there. Because you need to be there, because you're supposed to be there. Your being state in awareness says, I'm where I'm supposed to be, doing the things I'm supposed to do, accepting what is, not what I want, not what I'd like, what is.
In previous discussions, we had equated that to riding the wave, a surfer riding the wave. The wave is coming in, and you don't have control of it, but what you're doing is shifting your board around so that you can get the optimal ride safely into shore. But when you're talking about awareness, it's understanding that you are not just this board. You are actually the wave that's connected to something far greater. You happen to be that wave form in that particular place and time. And when you understand that, riding the wave is too small.
Yeah.
Your consciousness is vast.
Yeah.
And it's part of something so great that you can't be distilled down to the single point.
Right. You're not the wave or the rider, but you are all those things.
Well, you're not the board
No.
or the rider. There's an aspect of you that forms that wave, which kind of appears as if it's an individual thing, but the connection is still part of the great ocean.
Yes. I mean, that's exactly it. And to come back a little bit to where we were, that deep state of being allows you to be all of those things. As you said, you are vast. The vastness of being allows for the board, the rider, the emotion, the elation, the thoughts, the experience, all of it. And yet it's all within your being. And it's all connected back up to spirit and to source.
So we have reached the end of our hour.
Just about, yes. But this was a joyful, being-filled hour.
It was peaceful.
It was peaceful. Anyway, I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.